I am here to give a little tutorial on my material, which is iron, and I'm going to show you how to transform some basic white cardstock die cuts to something that resembles intricate rusted iron embellishments. Alright, so to start off, you're going to need some texture paste, or you can also use like a joint compound, which is available at pretty much any hardware store. I'm using this texture opaque matte from Ranger. You're going to need something that you can ink over that will take the color, that won't resist the color. So I'm thinking, I did not try any of the clear pastes, but I'm thinking you probably would have trouble with a clear paste. I'm thinking that would resist the ink. You need something that is going, excuse me, to absorb the ink color. So I'm using the opaque matte, and what you're going to want to do, I have just a fine tip bottle here. I mixed some texture paste with just a little bit of water into what you want is to have a consistency that you can squeeze out of the bottle, but not so runny that it doesn't hold its shape. So you just have to play around with your ratio of texture paste to water and get one that works for you. You can see here I can easily squeeze it out of the bottle, but it's still holding its shape. So that is the first thing you want to do. Mix up some of your texture paste. Okay, and then you're going to want to choose your die cuts. I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do this. First of all, using a die cut, and then I'll give you another option of, I'll show you how you can use some stamps along with that as well. So this is a fancy frame die cut that I have cut from white cardstock, and you can see there's lots of decorative cuts on this die cut, which is going to be perfect for this technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bottle of texture paste, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of trace along some of the design in this die cut. I'm going to go along these flourishes here. I'm also going to go along these straight lines here that kind of radiate out of the center. And don't worry about it being perfect. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, perfectly even. Just think of old iron embellishments. You know, they're not perfect either. The lines are and the designs are sometimes kind of rough and worn. So don't worry about, you know, if your hand is not real steady like mine is not, don't worry too much about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. So that's what you want to do, is just kind of go along and trace some of those designs, and then you're going to want to set it aside so that it can completely dry. And you can use your heat gun to speed that up if you want, if you're impatient like me, but you do want to make sure that it is completely dry. You're going to run into problems if it's still kind of squishy in the center. So completely dry. Alright, so that was the die cut technique. Just keep adding your texture paste until you're happy with your design, and we'll add the color a little bit later after that's dry. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to show you another technique similar, it's kind of the same effect, but how you can use your stamps instead of just your die cuts. I'm going to be stamping on a Matte Stack 6 die cut here, and look for stamps that are like flourishes or brackets, something that is kind of reminiscent of an old iron embellishment. Here I'm using the bracket from the newly released Quoted Right Moment stamp set. It's just a pretty bracket. It does have a little line under here, which we're not going to use, but it's okay. You'll see how that works in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink that up with a light color ink. I'm using fine linen. I would suggest using something light colored like that, so that your embossing paste will bleed a little bit in the color, and you don't want that to show through your inking that we're going to do later. So choose like a soft color, something like this fine linen or soft stone, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that a couple times onto my die cut near the top and the bottom. And you can see how it also stamped the center line, which is part of the image, but we're not going to worry about that. We're going to leave that we're not going to go over that with the texture paste. So I'm going to take my bottle of texture paste and just outline that design. And again, don't worry about being perfect or getting it perfectly smooth. It can be kind of rough. You'll see, it'll turn out later when you're done. So I'm just going to go ahead and trace that. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and do this bottom one as well, and I am not going to trace those center lines. Those will get covered up when we do our inking in a little bit. All right, so when you're finished texturizing your design, go ahead, set it aside and let it dry completely. All right, so my die cuts and my texture paste is completely dry. Now I can move along to the really fun part of adding the color and really bringing this design to life and making it look very realistic. So there's some different options here as far as what you want to use to color your die cut. I'm going to be using just some ink pads. I have 3 different colors here. I have dark chocolate, terracotta tile, and some ocean tides. And then I'm also going to be adding a little bit of metallic finish using some perfect pearls. So you can use inks and perfect pearls like I am, or you might have some metallic paint or something else that you'd like to experiment with adding the colors. But I will show you how I did mine using inks and the perfect pearls. All right, so I'm going to start off by inking my die cut with some dark chocolate ink and just using my sponging tool. Okay, so I have the whole thing covered with brown with the dark chocolate ink. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to some terracotta tile ink, and I'm going to add a little bit of this rusty color to some of the areas. Doesn't have to be the whole thing, just kind of a few areas here and there. And you can play around with different colors. You don't have to use the same colors that I'm using. Using different colors will give you a different effect. Just depends on what kind of look you're going for. I wanted a real old kind of rusty look. Okay, then I'm going to switch to ocean tides. This just adds a little bit of depth of color. You don't really see the greenish blue color, but it just kind of adds a little bit of depth. Okay, so now we're going to add some of the perfect pearls for a metallic-y finish. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this perfect medium cube and I'm just going to sponge that over top of my die cut. Doesn't have to hit every area evenly because you're going for kind of a rough look. So I'm just going to sponge that just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and take, this is a color, is called Heirloom Gold and Pewter. And use my brush. The perfect medium is almost like a glue to hold the powder in place if you've never used the perfect pearls before. So I'm just going to brush some of this over. And again, it doesn't have to be everywhere, it doesn't have to cover, I really don't want it to cover completely because I want my color, my inks to show through. I'm going to add a little bit of this pewter color in there as well. All right, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm just going to rub over top of that to kind of blend those colors take away any of the excess powder. Just give it a real rustic looking sheen. Because old rusty iron isn't exactly, you know, shiny gold. I don't want it to be shiny gold. I just want that metallic shine to be a little more subtle. Okay. And that's all there is to it. And then, you know, like I had showed you, I had added the embossing and texture to the stamped image. You do the same exact thing. Go over it with the ink and with the colors and add your metallic. Same exact process. It's just a different technique using stamps instead of just your dies. Alright, so that concludes this little tutorial on creating your own iron embellishments. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're enjoying all of the Stamp-a-faire festivities. Thanks for watching!